I'm here with Bryan Coleman, who's an old friend of mine. He's, well, not actually, you're not that old a friend, really, are you? You
No,
feel
no,
like an
no.
old friend.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make him a coffee. Brian's really involved with men's mental health, so I wanted to make him coffee, find out more about what he does in that. Obviously, you know, that's like a cut thing. I'm a cut because now I'm sitting down. I'm pouring you a coffee, and we're gonna have a wonderful conversation about men's mental health, or maybe mental health in general. Why men's mental health? First of all, well, where do I start? Okay, you're involved with men's mental health. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So I began mental health, I suppose my involvement in the mental health space in 2012 with a charity called Banksia. And I essentially began as a speaker, speaking to young people, to
Yeah.
youth. And it was in that space, I was in a small town called Cobar, and um, I basically realised through a number of conversations that I had that uh, there weren't any services in particular that provided really clear services specialised for men in the mental health space. I did some research over the years, and I kind of, found that although there were, I suppose, particular service providers, I felt as though there was an opportunity to do something a little bit different, something a little bit more holistic in the mental health space. Although, in saying that, everything that's been done at the moment is incredible. So, for me, my passion on men's mental health began there, but also with my own mental health experiences as well. So,
What's that about? What are your own mental health issues? You don't have any mental health issues, do you?
well, I mean, I'd say everybody has issues that they duck in and out of.
Yeah.
I've definitely had my issues in the past. I've
Yeah.
obviously, had mental downturns, and I've had to learn how to come out of that in a way that's been stronger for me overall. So, that journey in itself is always difficult, no matter who you are. And for me, I was just lucky to have great, family and friends around me to help me through that process. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, no, right now, I'm supposed to answer your question right now. No, I'm not suffering from a mental illness. But
Not true.
yeah,
I
but
suppose though it's easy for someone looking at someone like you, and probably someone like me, to say, if you just see someone out partying or something, wearing a suit or something like that, that person looks like they have all the things that they need in order to be happy. They have the things that people on TV have, or whatever. Like I know some of your stories that you told me early days. Like at 19, you were nightclub promoting, like partying with models, taking in a tidy sum
yeah,
every month. That is unbelievable to me. Um, and then have always had access to that ever since. So what do you think is missing that could make someone have a downturn, or is it just something everyone has to go through and just depends on how you deal with it?
yeah. Look, I think, just touching on what you first said there about the suits and I suppose what we'll refer to as the exterior presentation of self. At the end of the day, we as human beings, most of us are very good at hiding behind some form of act or presentation of what we want other people to see. And, more often than not, we will fool most people. The people close to us generally won't. They won't be as easily fooled, I'll say. And look, I definitely did have a interesting teen years, early 20s, working in the nightclub industry in Sydney. And that was, facilitated through a number of things. I was doing studies at the time as well, and I mean, working, in that industry, you certainly experience a lot of different things. And at the time, it was actually quite a lucrative industry to be involved in, because the industry and the venues in Sydney were quite exciting. But in saying that, keeping to the mental health topic, obviously, you became aware, or I became aware, certainly, not just in hindsight, that there were some problems, underlying problems, where people were, drinking a little bit too much. Even I drank a little bit too much, and you sat back and questioned, why did that happen? Or I definitely think that a sense of self can often be missing when any individual consumes a large amount of substances, whether that be alcohol or food or any form of item that they consume en masse, to the detriment of their own health, then generally that means to me that they may be disconnected to themselves. So maybe a sense of self can often be missing in a situation like that, which can be dangerous for your health and your mental health. And I think it obviously takes, some time away from that, and also some time to reflect on, what you can gain from removing negative influences, or even certain influences from your life. And then, if it makes sense to reintroduce it, then sure, go ahead. But you first have to know why. So what is missing is a sense of identifying that why, and who am I in this situation, and what am I doing in this situation. I know that's getting a little bit esoteric, but or a little bit deep. But
Well, I think even just talking about things, whether or not that's something I think is missing from this discussion, is like, it's not just a matter of asking someone, how are you, and someone saying, I'm not feeling very well, and saying, oh, what's wrong. Like, sometimes it's just like, people need to talk about all kinds of things, but for me, I'll say, I want to talk about all sorts of things I see in the world, and like that, just probe down ideas that maybe delve away from the mainstream of thought. And it's like, who do I talk to about this without being seen as lame? Like, we really have a culture where our knee-jerk reaction to just about everything, and I'll say just about everything, is to make fun of each other. And even if it is in a joking way, it's very rare, I have found, to just be able to have a heart-to-heart conversation with little or no jokes that take a dig at the other person, where we sort of jump to assumptions that we already have about certain subjects when people just really need to talk about things.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to my next thing. I think, like, what about medication? If someone's down, what do you think about? I suppose I'm coming from the position of, do you think that there is a... What do you think of medication?
Look, I think now is probably a good precursor for, obviously, to mention that, for anyone watching, that, neither of us, including myself, is a mental health professional.
Yeah.
So we can only speak from our own personal experience and our own personal opinions on this. Now, I'm obviously of the opinion that, I feel that, with any decision made on any individual's mental health journey, it has to be their decision to make. So, in the context of medication, if a person is advised to take medication by a doctor and they choose to take it, then that's their decision to do so. If they choose not to take it, then that's also their decision to do so. I think everything needs to be taken in the context of, it is our decision whether or not we choose to practice any form of activity that is positive or negative on our health or mental health. So, there's plenty of science that supports, therapeutic lifestyle changes, such as, exercise, which we know the benefits of, healthy eating, which we are now understanding more about, and, even diving deeper into what that looks like, through to meditation and mindful practice, and how that can also positively benefit an individual's mental health, and also the mental health of large groups of people. So I think that every decision made on mental health practice is largely the choice of the individual, and it's up to the individual or those around the individual to guide them through an education process of understanding what are the alternatives available to them, and then they can develop, through the advice of others and also their own cognitive understanding of the situation, what is the appropriate thing for them. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to live with it.
Because as you know, I've had my little moment with mental health, where when I had my issues, or when people said to me, "We think you need to go and see someone," in that situation, it was an instant jump straight to medication. No one offered me any therapy, and it was an awful time, really, really awful. Yeah, so, and now I'm completely off medication, but not off meditation.
That's
Um, but yeah, eating well and just being more open with my thoughts that are on my mind in the moment, and also being careful who I talk to. Like, that's the other thing, you can't talk about this stuff with everyone. Sometimes people can be in agitation. I think that's a big difficulty, how to educate people about which friends to talk to about this. Do you think so? Or do you think we should be
No,
talking
look,
to
definitely.
everyone?
Yeah, no, look, I think definitely with any conversation, whether it's mental health or any conversation in general, we need to be aware of how receptive our audience is, whether that is an individual or a group. And, you know, part of human dialogue and communication is that sometimes any individual may or may not resonate well with what we say, and we need to be comfortable with the fact that they have an opinion and have a right to that opinion, in this country at least, and that they can express it freely, and we should do our best not to be offended by their responses. But in the same breath, if they choose to be offended by our actions or responses, then we just need to understand that that's their choice to be that way, and let them be that way without getting too caught up in, I think, the rigmarole of, you know, control or you know, people trying to put forward what they think is right rather than asking the question, how can I help? Which I think that's really where
that's
the benefit
huge,
comes from.
I reckon. No, I actually
Yeah.
mentioned that one time I was catching up with you, and we are talking about something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, the culture that we have here of when someone says something, to point the flaws in it rather than saying, how can I help? Or, ask a question, tell me more about that, what do you mean by this? To actually understand, because I was talking about some wild things when I had my first episode. Now I suppose I'm jumping down a rabbit hole, we have to explain what all of that means. But yeah, to be someone, to teach people, to be the sort of person who will say, how can I help? Well, I think there's a huge amount of things that we can achieve as people, as a community, if we're saying to each other, how can I help?
Definitely.
Rather than, here's the problem that you'll run into. You can't do that because of this or that, which are often sort of, I think, more a reflection of people's belief of what they can achieve themselves, and also because no one else has said to that person, how can I help?
Definitely. I think it starts and ends with compassion. There's a lot of great information out there where we can understand the complexities of different mental illnesses or even mental health practices that will lead to positive mental health. But, you know, if you have compassion for yourself and then compassion for other people, then often that's a good place to start, because at the end of the day, if someone, and I had this conversation the other day, I said, if someone is making a mistake and they're doing something wrong by you that is clearly not in their nature, that will certainly hurt your feelings.
Yes.
But the question is do you attack them, or do you ask them why they are behaving that way, and then choose to help them regardless of how you feel, while still expressing to them that you are hurt? It's a sense of vulnerability in saying that your feelings are hurt, but there's also a lot of power in just being able to be compassionate and hold that strength for a person who's clearly, acting out. And I'm in a situation where, say, a friend gets drunk and they say something rude, or they might get really hyper agitated and start swearing, and that kind of behaviour clearly is just an indication that something may not be okay. And often it's the situations, not when someone's saying to you, oh, I think I'm feeling sad. It's usually the situations where someone's generally making you sad or angry that are the ones where they may be actually someone who requires help. And it's compassion that's going to be the hardest decision to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we react to the symptoms rather than asking why the symptoms exist,
Yes.
to look at things pragmatically and say, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah.
From a place of genuine rather than, are you okay? You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tone can often change everything, can't it? So,
Well, might leave it there, I suppose, just 'cause I think that's a good thing to end on, like the beginning being
yeah.
compassion, which is really hard. It's a tough thing. I think compassion is very tough. I think especially for men,
Yeah.
because we're taught to be pretty brash and just, I don't know. The compassion is not something can be seen as a weakness, when in my opinion it's actually the opposite. Compassion takes guts and
Yeah.
it's a sacrifice to be compassionate.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think in the olden days, you know, people would identify being compassionate or having empathy as potentially being, what do they say? Is it being a wuss or being kind of wispy or feminine? And
Yeah, so
yeah, or a sook. And I think, you know, I think now we've kind of gone a better understanding around what that actually means. It's, you know, to care for someone else and to really, you know, connect and say, look, at an emotional level, like really start using language around emotion. You know, that isn't actually as weak as, you know, it previously was understood as. And I think our generation is really learning to turn that conversation around, which is great. We're learning to, you know, identify with emotion. We're learning to actually communicate at an emotional level. And as guys, we can talk to one another and say, you know, how we're feeling, and that for that not to be seen as weak, but to rather be perceived as strong, which is a social change. So look, I think it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it, Ryan.
cool. Thanks, Brian.